Hey, family, it is so good to be here with you today. So much is going on, and last week was certainly the cherry on top of all of it, right? I'm so grateful that we could be together today. And I believe there's a word from the Lord for us today. As we continue our One Word That Can Change Your Life series, today's word is, drum roll, decide. Today's word is decide. And we're coming from Acts 26, verse 1 through 7, the New King James Version. I'll read. Then Agrippa said to Paul, "You are permitted to speak for yourself." So Paul stretched out his hand and answered for himself. "I think myself happy, King Agrippa, because today I shall answer for myself before you concerning all the things of which I am accused by the Jews, especially because you are expert in all customs and questions which have to do with the Jews. Therefore, I beg you to hear me patiently. My manner of life from my youth, which was spent from the beginning among my own nation at Jerusalem, all the Jews know. They knew me from the first, if they were willing to testify that according to the strictest sect of our religion, I lived a Pharisee. And now I stand and am judged for the hope of the promise made by God to our fathers. To this promise, our 12 tribes, earnestly serving God night and day, hope to attain. For this hope's sake, King Agrippa, I am accused by the Jews." Let's pray. Good and gracious God, we come before you this day and we are grateful. We're grateful that the power that was able to sustain Paul is the same power able to sustain us all. And so, God, I ask that you would open our understanding, that we might receive something transformative out of your word today. Open our understanding. Open our hearts. Help us to lean into your word and what it is you're offering us today in this word. Decide. Now, Lord, I ask that you would move me out of the way and that you would flow freely through us all. We give you thanks and praise. And I especially lift up Roderick and Mark and Marcus. And thank you for their faithfulness in seeing us through. We bless you, God. We thank you for the band that continues to serve dutifully. We thank you for David, for all those who have helped to make worship possible in what have sometimes felt like impossible conditions. Oh, but God, we bless you today. And we thank you for the way you keep showing up and inviting us to live our very best lives. Have your way with us. Amen and amen. This morning, I want to share 4 points with you. And those points are really based on having looked at Acts, the 26th chapter, and talked and thought about Paul's life and all the distress that was going on in his world. And so I said 4 points. There are 5 points. I forgot to add one. So there are 5 points. I want to tell you what those are, give you time to grab your paper and your note-taking potential possibility pen, pencil, whatever you're going to write with. So here are the 5 points. Now, first I got to tell you this. These points came to me because I have been recognizing how much duress we've been living under. It seems like if it's not one thing, it's another. We go from social justice uprising and 4 years of political backbiting and hating. And then we deal with COVID-19 on a daily basis, masking up, social distancing. And then last week in Texas, millions upon millions found our lives blanketed in snow, cut off from electricity and water. It's enough to make you want to throw up both your hands. And so there have been times, and I got to be honest with you, during these past few weeks, these past days even, where I've had to catch myself because I found my thoughts spiraling down. And you know, I know depression oh too well. And so I listened and asked God for a word for us, and the word that came was this word. I remembered the passage where Paul said, I think myself happy. So, hope you had time to get your paper and pen. Here are the 5 points. Number 1, decide to notice what you're noticing. Number 2, decide to question your beliefs. Number 3, decide for your freedom. Number 4, decide for a new awareness. And number 5, decide to think yourself happy. If you and I believe that we've been suffering during these past 12, 13, 14, 15 months, man, sometimes it seems like from one day to the next, a whole year has gone by. Have you felt that way too? If you and I think we've had it hard and we've had it rough, you've got to hear what Paul had written in 2 Corinthians, the 11th chapter, verse 23 through 33. I'll be reading the Message version. He says, I've worked much harder, been jailed more often, beaten up more times than I can count, and at death's door, time after time. He said, I've been flogged 5 times with the Jews' 39 lashes. Now, the 39 lashes was the law itself, that you couldn't beat a person more than with 40 lashes because it was believed that 40 lashes would put the person to death. He had that kind of beating 5 times. Beaten by Roman rods 3 times, pummeled with rocks. They tried to stone Paul to death. He said once. He said, I've been shipwrecked 3 times and immersed in the open sea for night and day in hard traveling year in and year out. I've had to ford rivers, fend off robbers, struggle with friends and struggle with foes. I've been at risk in the city and at risk in the country, endangered by desert sun and sea storm, and betrayed by those I thought were my brothers. I've known drudgery and hard labor, many a long and lonely night without sleep, many a missed meal, blasted by the cold, naked to the weather. And that's not the half of it. When you throw in the daily pressures and anxieties of all the churches, when someone gets to the end of his rope, I feel the desperation in my bones. When somebody is duped into sin and angry fire burns within my gut, if I have to brag about myself, I'll brag about the humiliations that make me like Jesus. The eternal and blessed God and Father of our Master Jesus knows I'm not lying. Remember the time I was in Damascus and the governor of King Aretas posted guards at the city gates to arrest me? I crawled through a window in the wall, was let down in a basket, and had to run for my life. Doesn't it appear that if we look at Paul's life in some ways, all the stuff we've been going through doesn't really quite compare? But yet each of us has our own limits as to suffering, our own ways of being, and our own stuff that comes up when we find ourselves struggling. When we find ourselves working through difficulties that seem to surround us on every side. I'm grateful that the Spirit brought this passage up to me because it reminds me that just like Paul, you and I have an opportunity to decide that no matter what's going on in and around us, that we can decide if we're going to spiral down with the circumstances and situations, or if we'll do point number one. Notice what we're noticing and begin to decide to spiral up in our thinking. When we look at this passage, deciding to notice what we're noticing, it's the opportunity for us to pay attention. You know, it would be so easy for so many of us to find ourselves depressed, to find ourselves feeling hopeless, to find ourselves in despair. Because granted, there is a lot going on. But we get to decide. That's the power that we've been given through this great and mighty God of ours. Just like Paul, all that he had going on. And when he found himself in court for believing that Jesus resurrected the dead, read the chapter in Acts 26. In court, having to prove himself. And he kept saying, but all these people know me. I want to suggest to you that we too are in court. We are often holding court in our own mind. And the invitation is to notice what we're noticing about our thinking. Notice what we're noticing about how we're feeling. Notice what we're noticing about what seems to raise up in us. Are we too hungry for a new way of being and living? Are we too angry? And we find ourselves spewing out to the person that steps in our pathway, or too lonely because of social distancing, or flat out just too tired of all of it. Notice what you're noticing so that you can then make the necessary adjustments. You can decide whether you'll keep spiraling down or you'll choose to spiral up. One of the things that came to me is the fact that we have to do, number two, we have to decide to question our beliefs. I've been talking to us for a while about that, about thework.com by Byron Katie. You can Google it, The Work, T-H-E-Work, W-O-R-K.com. She invites us to pay attention to our beliefs. We can decide what we believe. Yet so often we're operating off the beliefs that we've had since we were children. And we've never questioned them. This past week, I had an opportunity of speaking with several people, and one in particular had the belief that she wasn't enough for her task, for her job assignment. And so I asked her, would you allow me to ask you a couple of questions? And so I just pulled out Byron Katie's question number one. And this is what we have to do if we're going to decide to change our beliefs. We have to question them. Just as Paul was being given the opportunity to state his case, we have to question our beliefs. Just like Paul was in court. Now, he was being tried by an audience, right? But we are being tried. Our thoughts are being tried. And we've got to put our beliefs on the stand. Do they still stand up? Do they still hold up? Are they beliefs that are inviting us to live our most expansive life? Or are they beliefs inviting us to stay constricted and small, restricted, minimal? When we've been given a spirit of expansion and growth. So we have to decide that we're going to check our beliefs. And so when I was speaking with one of the young people that I was speaking to last week, and here she was, believing that she didn't have what it would take to do her job. She had a major project ahead of her. And so I asked her question number one. is it true that you don't have what it takes? And she says, I feel like it. I said, okay, that's okay. It's great. Just be honest. That's the key. Then number 2, I said, are you certain that you don't have what it takes? And she said, well, as best I can tell, it feels that way. And often our beliefs have these feelings attached to them. So we find ourselves having to put our beliefs on trial, just like Paul was on trial. We must decide to try and test our beliefs. Are they true? That's the first question. Number 2 is, can you absolutely know that it's true? And so I said that to the person I was speaking to. Can you absolutely know that it's true, that you don't have the capacity to do your job? And she said, it feels like it. And so at times we've got to notice that we're not just dealing with the belief, we're also dealing with the feeling. So we've had these beliefs, and they've been attached to certain feelings. Then those feelings have been attached to actions, and they have generated results. And so we've got to put our beliefs on trial. We've got to decide to question them, to make sure that they are accurate and that they are inviting us to live our most expansive life. So the first question I asked her was, is it true that you don't have what it takes? Then, can you absolutely know it's true that you don't have what it takes? And so then the third thing I asked her was, how do you respond? How do you act when you believe that you don't have what it takes? And so she said, my chest gets tight. And I start not being able to breathe. And I get short with people at work. And I stop wanting to be engaged in conversation. I shut down. And so as she began to notice what her beliefs were doing in her and with others around her, we began to notice that belief was constricting her, causing her to be smaller than she's being called to be. So the fourth question is this: who would you be without that thought? So the question is, who would you be without the thought that you don't have what it takes? And she began to say, well, I think I would be happier at work. Okay, so write it down. And what else? Who else would you be? And she said, well, I think I would feel freer. I think I would be more creative. I think I could really get into this. I said, okay, write it down. So who would you be without the thought that I don't have what it takes? She said, maybe I could be more collaborative. Maybe I could ask people at work if they could help me with the project, because there are some people. And all of a sudden she started thinking about people who had previously said they were interested in the kind of project she was doing. You see why we have to decide to change our beliefs if those beliefs are no longer serving us, because those beliefs have to be questioned. We have to question, is it true? Is it absolutely true? And who am I? How do I respond when I believe that thought? And then who would I be without that thought? You see, the key here is deciding to question our beliefs so that we might come into point number 3, deciding for our freedom. You see, Paul decided for his freedom, and he tells us about it in 2 Corinthians. He said that the king was after him, had guards posted all around. He ended up having to climb through the window on the wall and had somebody lower him down in a basket, and then he ran for his life. You see, he was determined. He had already decided that he wanted to be free. You and I have to make that same decision. Otherwise, we continually allow our old belief systems to keep us bound, to keep us in chains mentally and emotionally, and believe it or not, even physically. And so I want to invite you to decide for your freedom. What will your freedom look like as it relates to your time? Would you like the freedom to be able to, when all of this is over, to volunteer perhaps in some way? Would you like the freedom to be present, to take a holiday or vacation when you want to? Would you like the freedom as it relates to your time and money to be able to generously give to the places that are important to you? You can decide for your freedom. Freedom in your finances. What would that look like? Freedom in your relationships. What might that look like? Freedom in your health and well-being. What would that look like? You and I have the right, because we are beloved children of God, and we have the right to choose for freedom. Freedom to create memories, freedom to be happy, freedom to be generous, freedom to break generational habits that have kept our families in bondage for decades. We can decide for freedom. What about even the freedom to be astonished by how God can show up in the midst of whatever we're dealing with? Point number 4, decide for a new awareness. Now, this is the place where it takes practice. We have to practice daily, affirming the kind of awareness that we really do want. I'm reading a book called The Power of Decision by Raymond Charles Barker. Raymond Charles Barker. The book is The Power of Decision. And in it, he says, decide for a new awareness. We've been saying this over and over, that we have to affirm what we do want, not what we don't want. Whatever you say after you say, I am, comes looking for you. So why not decide for the awareness that I am happy, that I am healthy, that I am terrific, that I am fit, that I am fabulous. Why not be fabulous? Everybody else gets to choose. Why shouldn't you? That I am more than enough. That I am capable. That I'm terrific. That I have everything I need. And so that brings us to the 5th and final point. Decide to think yourself happy. You know, I told you that several times during all this stuff we've been dealing with. I've had to notice what I was noticing about my thinking. Noticing that it was spiraling down. And then to begin to affirm what I did want. And so sometimes I'd walk through the house and go, yes, yes to life. Instead of saying no. That spiral down kind of thinking. But when we talk about deciding to think ourselves happy, it's a decision. You get to decide, and that authority and power doesn't belong to anybody but you. I want to close with this story. There's a story called The Tale of Two Wolves. It's said that a Cherokee grandfather was sitting with his grandson, and he wanted to inform his grandson about some principles of living. And so he said to the grandson, son, I want you to know that within all of us, there are two wolves, one evil, one good. The evil one is filled with anger and doubt and disappointment and frustration. And the evil one would rather rip you to shreds than to have you live your best life. And then there's the good one. The good one longs for you to know joy and contentment and hope, ecstasy, pleasure, delight with life. And yet, they war within all of us. And so the little boy, after a moment, looked to his grandfather and said, Grandfather, which one of them will win? And the grandfather looked at his grandson and said, Son, the one you decide to feed is the one that will win. I want to say to each of us, we can decide. We can decide to think up and feed the good within us. It's our choice. Our word for today, decide. I'm praying that you'll decide for what gives you life today. For what gives you life, as Jesus put it, abundantly. Hey, family, I hope this word is speaking to you, and I'm looking forward to seeing you on Wednesday when we're going to do a little more digging with this. Make it a great day and an exceptional week. You get to decide.